The stage is set and, for the most part, our preamble is done. We talked about the very beginnings of original programming on this network and the key people behind every step, but nobody on Earth thinks about Moxie or Two Stupid Dogs when you ask them what the real first Cartoon Network show is. The first real cartoon, Dexter's Lab. Gennady Tartakovsky, an alum from the dreaded CalArts, of which they force you to draw bean mouths and noodle arms 18 hours a day like the Wheel of Pain from Conan the Barbarian, got his start just out of college working on a little-known indie gem known as Batman the Animated Series. Though production was in Spain in Lapis Azul Productions, and he had to leave the country for his time on the show, where he learned firsthand the brutal grind it is to produce TV animation. After his mother passed away, he returned home and into the loving embrace of not only one, but two stupid dogs, alongside all of his hippie SoCal artist friends, previously discussed in last week's episode. That group of folks became lifelong partners and even close friends, but it wasn't immediately apparent where they would all go next. All had other jobs as character designers or board artists, or had their own shows they were pitching and failing to make. Gennady himself was a sheet timer for The Critic before Larry Huber, aka the parental supervision on Two Stupid Dogs and Secret Squirrel, was able to show his first Dexter short to Mike Lazo, and the pitch was accepted. After the shorts program was through, and 48 shorts and pilots were developed, Dexter stood above the rest as Lazo's favorite and got the green light for a full show. At that time, Gennady was only 27, exceptionally young for an industry full of Don Draper-era 40-year-old boomer guys. Rudish and McCracken helped turn the short into a real show, and in turn, Gennady helped McCracken with his own show that you may have heard about a super intelligent chimpanzee named Mojo Jojo, and also some side story about three little girls that are superheroes. McCracken ended up becoming the de facto second in command at Dexter's Lab, including being the main character designer. When the show was fully picked up for more episodes, more notable industry folks just getting their start lined up to join the crew. Butch Hartman, Seth MacFarlane, John McIntyre, and of course, known sex pervert and Death Cult member Chris Savino. While for sure Two Stupid Dogs was incredibly important to the future of TV animation, Dexter's Lab and the folks behind it took it to another level. There is no clean creation myth or perfect candidate for a cartoon that started it all in terms of what we call modern cartoons, but if you had to make the argument, you could do it pretty easily with Dexter's Lab. Its tail is so long and vast that it is still swinging today. But what about the show itself? Is the show secretly genius? Or do we want to stay out of this laboratory? In the immortal words of Dee Dee, ooh, what does this button do? As in, the play button on this podcast, which you should press if you want to find out more. Stay out of my freaking secret laboratory. In this week's episode of Cartoon Buffoons, I'm your host Wyatt, and who is here with me today, as always?
Oh, it's me, Morgan. I'm like Headmaster from Transformers Animated, but a black woman.
There you go. And who is our very special guest to talk with us about Dexter's Laboratory?
Steve Yurko, and I am not a cookie.
And we're here to talk about Dexter's Lab. Steve, you've recorded with me before, me and Nikki, and we've done Austin Powers, and we did the Power Rangers movie, the like 90s one. And
yeah, I'm just waiting on those Criterion releases at this point.
Yeah. So now we're doing another thing here. We're doing Dexter's Lab. go at Cartoon Buffoons. This is my excuse to go through and watch a bunch of old Cartoon Network shows. So,
All
Dexter's Lab, yeah, all of them. Squirrel Boy, we're doing that. It's fine.
Okay, maybe not all of them. I don't want to do Squirrel Boy.
But yeah, we'll do Deathman instead. But
well, you gotta do like the Land of Misfit, like cartoons or something.
yeah, that's the thing. Like, I want to do like all the pilots too, or I want to like it, but not like single episodes talking about the pilots, because some of them I doubt we could freaking talk about
just
them for.
get a bunch of them together. Like
Yeah,
a ball
exactly.
of
Just get
garbage.
like 4 or 5 pilots together at once and just be like, all right, let's talk about
Squirrel
these.
Boy, but wow, what era was that? That was
like 2006, because that was
I
like
think
yeah.
that was
it was
after
almost the Dyer era.
yeah,
It was
you
like
were heading
right
into
as-
the Dyer era.
What an
Yeah.
awful thing to call it! Like we're in the dark.
No,
ages
but
of
it's true
Dyer
though. People
era.
call it like the CN Real era.
Yeah, because it was like the soft beginning of CN Real, because 2006, like there was some good stuff. There was like Class of 3000, but there was Squirrel Boy and there was Out of Jimmy's Head and Reanimated and everything. And then it took a few years. It took until the writer's strike in 2009 for them to start making the real CN Real shows. And then like after that, there was like a few more, like Tower Prep and Level Up and some other shows
Oh
that
my
I've
god,
never seen.
Tower.
Yeah,
Squirrel Boy, I just think of like those
we
are like the cartoons that just like came and went like really quick.
Yeah, like
That
cartoons
I-
that could have been something, but they got swept up in the like kill it all.
Yeah,
I don't think I had any
Lobotomy
interest in
and-
Squirrel Boy. I think I just remember it being on TV, and I think I remember some sort of Happy Meal or Burger King toy tie-in or
Yeah.
something. But what was that? Was the Life and Times of Juniper Lee was like really like in and out the door.
Yeah.
which is sad because that's like, I don't know, a lot of these shows are like not bad. Even like
They needed time because usually you need at least 2 seasons to make a show that's like good, legitimately.
yeah,
like
that doesn't like. Look, My Jabroni's a Monkey, not a good show, but Camp Laszlo, better. Like,
pretty good.
yeah. So it's like, I don't know. It was just that was like a weird era. Anyway, we're not talking about that.
we're not.
Talking about Dexter's Laboratory.
A Fusion Fall fame, specifically.
Yes, a Fusion Fall fame. But I want to start with you, Steve, since you're the guest. What is your history with Dexter and, everything like that? What's your attachment to it?
Well, I would say my history with Dexter is probably gonna be the same as 90% of all people, as I watched it on TV.
Yeah.
And that's about it. But I remember Dexter coming along. I remember the initial What a Cartoon pilots, and Dexter was, it's like,
Yeah.
that's like the Mickey Mouse Club that had like Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake and
Yeah.
Christina Aguilera. It's the cartoons that came out of that. Like a lot of them became series. It was Dexter,
Yeah.
Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, Cow and Chicken, Courage. So
Yeah,
many series came out of that.
We just recorded Space Ghost. Like, we just did an episode on Space Ghost with Toby. Check that out.
Very
And yeah, it was like we were talking about that. We were like, holy crap, definitely wasn't planned, but it was like, man, we're talking about Space Ghost. We got to talk about like, the treatment of like C. Martin Croker and Andy Merrill and everything like afterwards. But
it just kind of felt right because like the stuff they showed on Space Ghost, like even the episode they had animators on, a lot of stuff just started blossoming out and getting exposure because of that. It's kind of wild. That like those early like anthologies, let's show a bunch of stuff that we have going on shows. How many of those shows went on to just reshape what things we were watching as kids? Like,
Cartoon Network had just so much variety in the 90s. And then the late night shows that were like compilations and stuff like Toon Heads and all that, and that led into like Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It was something different going on like at certain parts of the day that just you don't see in television anymore because television is dying. But talking about Dexter, it's so funny because I feel like we'll go on a million tangents. For the people that don't know, I think we spent about a half hour talking about Transformers before we started recording. But Dexter was always, speaking of Space Ghost, I remember one of the things I thought about before doing this show was when Space Ghost Coast to Coast had like a contest where they picked the best What a Cartoon pilot on Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
And I remember being offended that Zorak said, and I quote, "Dexter's stupid."
Yeah, we talked about that one because like that was one of the first times I saw Van Partible, and Morgan mentioned that how hot he was, and I was like, yeah, he is, like, compared to like, I mean, Craig McCracken, young Craig McCracken was like, that was a shock.
Yeah, I've skateboarded with him. Like, he's very much that guy.
And everything. And like, I am glad, but there are some people on that episode where I'm like, who the hell is, like, what is this show? Like, what?
Is that like an actual, like, episode of Space Ghost, or was it like a special?
Oh, okay. No, it's like an actual episode of Space Ghost,
season 2 premiere.
God, I gotta go check that out. I just remember, I think, like, out of all those, like, I like Dexter the most, and, jumping ahead, like Dexter's Laboratory is my favorite cartoon. It has resonated. It resonated with me then. It still resonates with me today. I still quote it on a nearly daily basis. Something will, something will unlock my Manchurian Candidate, state of being. Half the time is bonk,
Yeah.
We'll talk about more, but like, also all the like extra non-Dexter mini shows that's in those first 2 seasons, man, they were kind of cooking with just like, let's have extra mini shows in between Dexter. Not everything's about him.
We should definitely talk about that at some point. Yeah, because it's so funny how so many of those shows did that, and ultimately were just phased out because no one really wanted to see the spin-offs. I do enjoy the spin-offs in Dexter, though. I think I'm more partial to Justice Friends than Monkey, but they're both great.
Monkey, I think, peaks very early. It's like it has like a couple really good episodes early on, and then like as it goes on, you're like, all right, I kind of get where this is going. Whereas like the Justice Friends is funny because it's always a sitcom just with the Avengers.
The laugh track for Justice Friends is, I think, just so beautiful. There's jokes that are funny that the laugh track kicks in, and it becomes 40 times funnier to
me. I think I would say they kind of like pivoted interest. Because Monkey I totally forgot that Dial M for Monkey had all those Justice Friends characters in that universe. Like, Dial M for M for Monkey was basically like their Jack Kirby comics show. And then, I don't know, like maybe when like Seth MacFarlane comes in and they're, coming up with new concepts for cartoons, maybe they just pivoted that way where they had more fun writing for those characters. Yeah. What's really fascinating about Dexter is just how much it shifts in its first season. It's still like it's like, and of course, like, because animation takes time, and this show is still cell animated, and you see like this huge shift in its style throughout the first season. By the end of the first season, it's like, this looks like what Dexter looked like, at least what I remember it looking like. And then it's kind of, they realize like, the Justice Friends are hilarious characters. Let's use them more.
Because it's not that often. Like, there's a lot more in season 2, and season 2 is definitely like the show. Like, when I was watching through episodes, I was like, holy, it was like you said, the Manchurian Candidate, like a sleeper cell agent activated, and I was like, I remember every single moment of this episode.
I remember going through season 1 like this. Man, I remembered a lot more like, where's all the memorable stuff? I'm like, it's season 2. We're just like, hey, if you've seen the Dexter meme online, I'm betting your money it's from season 2.
Yeah.
Like, and it's good. Like, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, one thing I want to mention is, like, going back to Dexter as an adult. Because I've watched episodes here and there, like, throughout my life. up to this point, but never really like sat down and watched like a bunch of episodes and really thought about it. But like I remember being like as a kid and as like a nerdy kid thinking that Dexter was very relatable, very sympathetic. Dexter's a total dick.
He's a giant piece of shit, man.
He's a total dick, and every time I go back and watch Dexter, I've had this like thought, and maybe it's kind of unfounded, or maybe I'm over exaggerating, but I think kids cartoons at this point, or maybe it was just like this group of animators coming in, there was just like this level of cynicism or something, but I don't think kids cartoons are allowed to be this cynical anymore. Like Dexter's a jerk, but Dexter's also like the punching bag. The show is like doesn't hesitate to make him miserable or even like have like a big fuck you ending at the end of like an episode for Dexter. Like the show loves to torture him.
Yeah, I mean,
he like, really gets W's. He very rarely gets his W's. And
yeah,
like,
the season 2 finale and the movie both end with as like a big fuck you to Dexter. Like a cool thing happens, but then it's like completely undercut by, the ending, and that should be annoying or like too cynical or whatever. But it just works. Like the movie, it's the
vibe.
Yeah, the movie for whatever reason, like I think it, even though it's like. Dexter is not a likable character, and like he's going through all this stuff, and he's being such a jackass, and it's literally called Ego Trip. But it's just like I love that movie because it's so dedicated to being like, here's just a movie where we just get to go completely batshit with all the dumbest. Like we're still as dumb as the show was, and like still like as outrageous and everything. And they also get to have like cool action, and everything. Like every time there was an episode with a robot, I was like, I remember this robot because I as a child I like autistically cataloged every single robot that appeared in Dexter's Laboratory. I was just like so obsessed with the robots. Like when I was watching the season 2 finale, I was like, I remember every single one of these robots that appeared.
I remember flipping my shit like. Because I've seen that episode millions of times, but then when I like got back into Transformers around like 2003, and then I'm watching that again, and then like I flipped my lid. I'm like, wait a second, Mom's robot car is just Rodimus Prime.
Yeah, it's the Winnebago. Yeah, it's that's yeah. Go ahead.
Like going through all the robots and stuff. Like it's like. There's like so much super robot love and also just Toku love throughout so much of that show that I'm like, this rules. Like, and the thing is though, I like how often they just make brand new robot designs when they really don't have to. Like we have Dexter's like main 2 robots, but every episode like this, hey, what if Dee Dee had a specific robot for this episode? Or like, Dexter's exchange student to Japan. Here's 6 new robot designs that we just did not have to do. And I'm like, because like some of them are around for like maybe 4 seconds and they're like, nah, I just want to do another one. Like Giddy was cooking. He just like, we should just design more robots.
The design work that went into those first 2 seasons is extraordinary. I just I'll say even Toyota, because I would love to have toys of so much of the stuff on the show.
Big agree.
But I think just like the characters alone look great. I think like, I think of like Major Glory as like, this is such a fantastic design. Like he's supposed to resemble a flagpole. It's his mask is the golden eagle on top. I remember when I was like, I think I must have been in elementary school, and I was looking at like a flagpole in our auditorium / cafeteria, and I realized I'm like, oh, that's what Major Glory is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And these guys are, they're wearing their influences on their sleeves here because they're obviously like huge Jack Kirby Marvel Comics fans, and they also loved anime, like, and it's like the Toku, stuff.
Yeah,
and
Tokusatsu,
very
Godzilla and everything.
It was just Battle of the Planets. Like these guys loved that stuff, and they incorporated it into design and really stood out. Like no other show looked like this. And this is like right on the cusps of like the anime bubble really blowing up. Like,
Yeah.
Dexter could have totally been played on Toonami. It would have been
absolutely, yeah. 'Cause
acceptable.
this was like right when Z started, like 1996, I believe, was when it was. I don't know if it was on Toonami at that point.
It was on Toonami in 1998. So like right like, and 98 is like peak Dexter era too.
Yeah, season 2, like that and everything. Because I did, I have a lot of, like, I was pretty young when that was airing, like Dragon Ball and Dexter and everything. But I do have memories of, the like original, like those Vancouver voices. Is it Vancouver? That's
yes.
the ocean dub.
Yeah.
Like those voice actors and everything. I don't want to piss anybody off because it's like it's still Funimation. It's just that they hired Vancouver to do the voices for like up through like the fight with Ginyu, and then afterwards it was the in-house, much worse Texas. They got better.
Yeah, they
got
did.
better, but like
thankfully
at first
they've had
it was
decades and tons of video games to perfect these voices.
Kai, I feel like is like the peak. Like that's an excellent like English dub of Dragon Ball.
I gotta give credit when you talk about like Major Glory. Like I almost called him by the nickname I call him by, but Butch Hartman, like being like seeing his name for all the like Justice Friends series, I'm like, yeah, because he still draws superheroes the way like Major Glory looks in Fairly Odd Parents and stuff, and I'm like, all right, you know what? Maybe Butch Hartman was cooking a little bit. He did that. Like he was really cooking.
Yeah, it was like very like
I'm just asking for clarification. You did say Fartman, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Bitch.
I'm gonna while we're talking about Dragon Ball and Butch Hartman, I might as well get my headcanon out there that because people often talk about Butch Hartman and Seth MacFarlane both worked on. I think they were both on Dexter. I know. I think
they both worked on Dexter. Yeah.
And Johnny Bravo as well. Like very similar beginnings, and then of course they developed their own shows and like just very similar vibes. Similar, like they don't look similar at all, but just like I don't know, to anyone else, like I don't know, all white guys look the same to me.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Like, you see these guys, with their jet black hair, they're very similar, and my headcanon is just like their origin is the same as the Piccolo as we know him today. His origin from Dragon Ball, where they were one being and they split into one pure and one evil.
Yeah.
Just one guy's making a show that like a little annoying, but like he's good for unions and everything like that, and the other one's
the news just came out
that
he's donating his money to preserve animated shorts from like the 20s through the 40s. He's the good one.
Yeah, he's the good one, and the other one's just like weird and like being really fucking strange and Christian about stuff a lot of the time.
Oaxis,
and we're starting to realize like
ever coming.
We're starting to realize like, oh, you're not the great artist. You just hired better artists. Like,
The
reason why people love Danny Phantom so much is because of Steven Silver's designs.
Yeah. But I also just like I was doing my little researches about the shows, 'cause I like to do that. Like having Seth MacFarlane and Butch Hartman and later on to a greater extent Chris Savino and stuff on this show, and then they all like, and then also working so closely with Craig McCracken, so much so that like there's a lot of just straight up real crossovers between Craig McCracken's work in this. Really interesting. And I found out that this is very funny because I got this from the Samurai Jack behind the scenes stuff, not even Dexter's Lab, that Genji like made this show, and the reason why Dexter is so visibly Russian is because it's his self-insert.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'm like, okay, I get that. That's really cool. Why didn't you make his family Russian? Like, nah, it's about me. And I'm like, you know what? Big respect for going, that's
I think
I do.
It's funny because it's like, I'll use Family Guy as an example. It's like, why the hell is like Stewie like kind of like foppish, British in a way? And it's like, it's those inexplicable things. Like, who cares? It's a cartoon.
Yeah. Like it's so good, and like I love that like you can see what these people that want to do other stuff took from him and his very strange sense of humor, and it's really good.
I'll say that with as far as like Dexter's Family goes, go Dexter, yeah, whatever. I really enjoyed them this time around, and like Dee Dee especially is probably the funniest character. Like I just enjoyed her a lot because of like she's such a good agent of chaos, and she's so dopey and stupid and like cute. And then like their parents are just great. You know, Jeff Bennett as the dad, and then Kath Soucie as the mom. Kath Soucie, the fact that she's like can pull off such a like sweet, adorable mom voice, and then also be Phil and Lil, is like she's amazing. She's just like such a good voice actress.
Also, Dee Dee's friends too. Like God, she was doing so many roles.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, but especially like in the season 2 finale, like the mom is just like so cute the entire time. I was just like, aw, look at her. And then freaking what the hell's his name? Who does Mandark? I can't remember, but that guy is just so.
Eddie Deason.
Yes, Eddie Deason.
What an ear soul piercing voice. That's so perfect for the role.
And then like Eddie Deason himself looks exactly as nerdy as he sounds. Like you look at him and you're like, yes, he looks like the most stereotypical. Like if you cast that guy as a nerd in a show, you'd be like, come on.
It's stunt casting at its like absolute best.
Yeah. He's just like so perfect. I love Mandark. I've always loved Mandark. And you know, I can't remember too much about the like the Chris Savino seasons. I know they like retconned a bunch of stuff. Was that when they added in
don't get me started on that.
About the lore, like more lore and whatever.
Let's talk about the good times right now.
Yeah, I think we got the like Mandark is a hippie lore from those seasons.
Yes.
But like the thing about it is that I don't know. Mandark was so good, and I think Mandark's joke works perfectly. We're like, yeah, I'm better than Dexter. He's not even particularly evil Dexter either until like Ego Trip, where he really like leaned into being evil. But like, I love that he's like, yeah, I'm just like Dexter but smarter. But he also is constantly getting owned in the episodes he's in, along with Dexter. It's very rarely like, oh, Dexter just gets a clean W on Mandark or whatever. It's usually like they're both suffering. They both suck, and I think that's just so funny.
Yeah, that's the thing is that like Dexter, like he's supposed to be like like the better Dexter, like a shadow, a rival to him. But like, and we see him as like, oh man, he's a dick. But then like when you take a step back, you're like, oh, he's only a dick because Dexter is a dick.
Yeah, they're both assholes. They both suck. Yeah. Like, I also think that as far as like the first time Mandark gets introduced, the crux of the episode being purely just Mandark like this: I'm smarter than you. Deactivate your lab, and Dexter going okay until someone points out, why are you just going along with this? Is really good because it's one of those like this. Man, I don't think either of these kids are particularly smart. Like they're smart, but they're like these guys are kind of fucking dumb. Like
that's like the genius being able to be like they're literally like preternaturally intelligent, but they also like so much of the jokes have to be about how dumb they are, and like. Yeah, especially like in season 2, I feel like, or at least like I would say even as early as season 1, because they had all the like what a cartoon like shorts before that. They kind of figured out that that's like the joke with Dexter is that he's like extremely smart, but he's not very like street smart or clever or whatever. Like he has like no common sense essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think realizing now it's like, oh, just because you are a very intelligent person doesn't mean you're not socially awkward in the worst ways. And I'll also say like I think like the people creating cartoons in the 90s, especially for like Cartoon Network, is there's so much like what people associate with cartoons back then was just very gag heavy comedic stuff. And like you got to think of what the premise of Dexter is. It's like I think like that pitch, that selling point is Dexter's a boy genius who's so smart he has his own secret laboratory, but his older sister Dee Dee, who's just into ballet and ponies, other stuff, continues to be a menace and just wreck it for him. That's like it's a Looney Tunes dynamic.
Yeah,
and I just like I don't think that's like I don't see anyone coming up with ideas like that anymore. Everything is very. Like we're living in an era where everything is very serialized and story driven.
Yeah. I have a lot of like, for me, this will never go anywhere, but I have like a few ideas for cartoons that are like, I want to do this as like a repeatable story thing, like rather than like I have my own like writing that I do that's like a storyline, but as far as like I like if I were to do a TV show, like if I were given that golden opportunity to like have a TV show, I would want to do something that's like this, where it's more like, yeah, there's continuity, or there's like they pay attention to like characters and things like that, but like it's less strict about that. It's less strict about like telling a story. There's no like ultimate end goal really. It's just here's the circumstances that these characters are in, and we're just kind of like repeating it. I think a later show that Craig McCracken did, Wander Over Yonder, does a great job of like mixing that, where like especially in the second season, where there is like an ongoing story, but it's still like the story can only progress like at very specific points. Like there are special like episodes that are allotted throughout the season, and that's the points where like the status quo is moved. Yeah. Speaking of which, I wanted to bring up with the, you know, Craig McCracken, like his connection to this. Like I feel like because of Powerpuff Girls, he's much more lumped in as like, oh, a superhero, like that kind of comic. And then like Kid Cosmic, you know, later with very like Jack Kirby kind of, yeah, art style and everything. But Wander like had a lot of like references to giant robots and Toku and stuff like that. There's like a later episode, Robo Mecha Batatron, which is like exactly the season 2 finale of Dexter's Lab, where it's like these 4 characters are piloting a robot and like they just don't know how to do it, so they just are getting their ass kicked by, you know, this other person that they're fighting. And like the comedy comes from that, of like how mismatched of a group it is. And like when I was watching that episode, I was like, oh yeah, this is, he like Craig worked on this episode, so he must have been inspired by this to write that like 20 years later. So.
And which show was that in?
That was in Wander Over Yonder. It was like towards the end of that show that they have like an episode where like Wander and Sylvia, who are like the 2 protagonists, and Hater and Peepers, which are the 2 antagonists, like have to team up to fight like a bigger antagonist, Dominator, and they get a giant like legendary robot, like a Voltron-esque, you know, combining robot, and you know, Wander is like completely pacifist, and like Hater is a buffoon, and like Sylvia and Peepers got their stuff together, but it's just like this, like, you know, a very similar kind of dynamic, but like in a different way that like works with those characters. And that show in general is also very Looney Tunes-esque in a lot of ways. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think like of like the influence of like Looney Tunes and other stuff is very good and funny in Dexter. Mm-hmm. But I think another thing that inspires the show that I hate to talk about, there's a lot of jokes with Monkey hooking up with stuff.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but more than 3. And I don't know how I feel about it. And it's never monkeys. It's like a duck. And then him and this lady have a really interesting relationship.
Yeah. That's... I think I'm fine with it just because it's like... It's so ridiculous.
No, it's funny. It's funny. Having a dinner date with a monkey where you got to give banana pudding, great joke. Oh, like top to bottom, clean joke. It's solid. It's bulletproof.
Yeah.
But it's one of those jokes that go, where were we at when we wrote this? Who were we at? Where are we
doing here? But oh yeah, I love. There's like an early monkey episode where, you know, there's like the Simeon or whatever, the like
hyper intelligent monkey.
And it's like I love that one because it was like a lot of you know, there's a lot of like Star Wars and Planet of the Apes references and everything before. This is like before any of that stuff was like hack basically.
Yeah.
Which is like,
oh yeah, like back when like you used to like pop for like a Star Wars reference.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh, see, you search your feelings, you know it to be true. Whoa.
Because Star Wars wasn't mainstream at that point. Well,
Yeah,
at that point, it was becoming big again.
It was before the prequels. So it was like,
yeah, like
right
the time they were probably writing and animating this show, like the special editions were coming out. So
yeah, which I still have those VHS tapes like in that box with Darth Vader's face on it. You know, I just still have them hanging around because they're worthless. I can't get rid of them, but I'm just like, yeah, these aren't edited. You know, they don't have the like CGI Jabba the Hutt, you know, hanging around, like that thing. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, that episode kind of really set in stone for me that like the premise of the Dial M for Monkey is like, okay, we start the episode with a bunch of action, but then he finds a way to solve the problem without like hurting or destroying the villain or whatever.
Yeah. Usually just from being a monkey, which I think is always a good bit. Like a lot of stuff like this. Oh, is it the Power Save? No, I'm just like kind of a monkey. Don't you want to be a monkey? Here's a banana. And the guy's like, you're right. I must throw all this away and go back to my nature as a monkey. I'm like,
yeah.
We're saying Monkey was doing all that before Steven Universe.
I know.
Exactly. Yeah. Monkey is scared to fight like tyrants and just wants to be their friend. But it's cool because he's a monkey.
Yeah. And Simeon, like, he has the same, like, talking about One River Yonder again, like, he has the same backstory as Hader, which is like we eventually learn that Hader was like a monkey that was like shipped out by, you know, to go to the moon or whatever, and then somehow got like lost in space and ended up becoming like what he is today, like a skeleton man, like a Skeletor-esque creature. And I was like, oh my god, dude. I mean, it's like not the most original story or whatever, but that was another thing where I was like, did Craig McCracken, was Dexter's Lab like his Rosetta Stone, you know, like was this the
this is some funky ideas I want to work with. But yeah,
because I remember Ian Jones Cordy, when talking about OKKO, like he said Dexter was one of his biggest influences, and he coined this term Hanna-Barbera, where it's like a show that's both like a Hanna-Barbera show in every meaningful way, but also cribs a bunch of stuff from anime, like stylistically, and everything like that. And OKKO was supposed to be a show where it has so many different elements and tones to it that you could take any one of those things and spin it off into its own show. So like Dexter's Lab had like, oh, you have like very serious, no words, stylish action, like, oh, that can become Samurai Jack, and you have like all the robot fights and giant monsters, and that can become Symbionic Titan, you know, and then you have all the like, you know, there's the caveman episode, and then that's Primal, you know, so like,
I always think that if OKKO was on when I was younger, I think I'd be so into it because it's just a blend of everything I like, and I realize now I'm like, oh yeah, it's just Dexter, you know, because Dexter is like just this really funny comedic show, but also has its action elements, and you know, and it loves anime, and it loves comic books. It's everything I want. And Dexter's, I think it's one of those shows where it was like almost like a primordial soup or something, where so many people that worked on it branched off and made things that you could argue were bigger. Like I would say Powerpuff Girls is a much you know, bigger show than Dexter was. You know, Family Guy, Fairly Odd Parents. It's like kind of what happens. Not saying like every, like it's like one of those, like it's one of those, it's super crazy No Way Schools. It's like that happened with like SpongeBob, where SpongeBob was such a huge thing, and so many creators came from that show, and the same thing happened with Adventure Time, and there's probably, and hopefully there's another show in the future where a lot of creative minds branch off of that. And
like
I need to revitalize the industry a bit.
Oh yeah, that has to happen first. It's just like that. Just like brings up a point where I feel it's a shame, because I feel like Dexter is not like a celebrated series. I don't know. I don't know if like Gendy really doesn't feel like talking about the show anymore. I remember seeing like an image that was like celebrating his career. It was like all these different shows that he worked on. It's like a timeline, like all these characters. It looked like a timeline, but he completely skipped Dexter's Lab. I was like,
yeah,
I'm like,
that's weird.
I'm like, you have Samurai Jack, duh, and Clone Wars, but no Dexter's Lab. Like none of these shows could have happened without Dexter's Lab.
I think I think the like core issue probably is like, and I'm just assuming here is that he like at the end of the day he didn't only make half of it, and like I guess that's just something you have to deal with. That's a bummer. That like, cause like look, I don't want to dunk on Chris Savino. I'm not going to.
I mean, deserved.
I'm not. You know what? I lied. I'm going to dunk on Chris Savino. He did make the other half of the show that's just not as good, and and it got I don't know. It's something weird about the story of like how Dexter was gone for 3 years, and then Gendy's like, "Hey, I can't do this. I'm doing Samurai Jack and other projects," and Chris Savino, and they give it to Chris Savino, and it's just like not the same.
Yeah. I remember being over the moon when they finally announced they were doing more episodes of Dexter. You know, little did I know that it was a complete, shift. Like I had no idea what a showrunner was at the time. And that like, cause now it's like when they do callbacks to Dexter, it's like, it's been rewritten. Like, oh no, this is what Dexter is. And Dexter always looked. I'm like, no, I hate these designs. It's like, they're too stylized. They're too flat. They're missing.
Reminds me of like Batman, like when it changed, like a lot of it, like stylized or like streamlined or whatever. Like a lot of the characters, like in the New Adventures of Batman, like those later seasons, like it just is like not quite to that same extreme degree because it was still looked really good. But,
some of them still work, but
but it was just like kind of like a weird shift that like you notice. Like even as a kid, I was like, why do these episodes like look different than. And it's one thing like SpongeBob goes like look at season 1 SpongeBob and then look at like season 3 SpongeBob and they're quite different. And then like now it's like evolved to a point where I'm just not interested in checking it out. But I'm also 30, so not for me. I'm not going to complain about it on the internet. But
if you find yourself complaining about a kid's show not being as good as you remember it, please, how could I put this,
step back.
Just please fuck off. It's just
that's just like well put.
Just step back off the cliff.
So, people our age weren't meant to be talking about how cool and how much better, I mean, it's arguable, but I'm saying like nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Please stop commenting saying that you think the show that you grew up with as a kid is better, and you watching kids shows today don't resonate with you because you're an adult. So that means they're terrible. Stop it.
We talked about with Toby, like when we recorded last, that like that's heaven is there for those who have eyes to see it. There are plenty of great shows that are on or have been on like in the past few years that you can check out that are like just as good, if not better, than stuff that we grew up with. Not to say that, not to devalue stuff like Dexter's Lab or Space Ghost or anything, but like in that like progress is the only way and everything before like needs to be destroyed. It's just that like something like Craig of the Creek is like just such a well-made, well-considered show with like a great cast of characters and a great crew of people making it that really care about what they're doing and everything. It's just like very easy to find similar situations to what you had with like Dexter's Lab or even Space Ghost, and in the modern day it's not that hard to find it, even though like they're definitely trying to make it hard. They're trying to make it very fucking hard.
And it's not creators, it's corporations that are trying to make it hard as shit. So like, let's point this. We got to stop pointing at anger like this, man. They don't make good cartoons anymore. People just don't have that talent. I'm like, well, no, people do. Just some things that rhyme with capitalism might be that make it hard, and I think that's fair. Like, I don't know. I think like. Dexter is really important and really good, and it does bum me out that like it does get forgotten in a lot of ways. But then I remember that in 2010, exposing myself now, I was a big Fusion Fall head. Hate to say it. No, I don't. I had the subscription. I love to say it. Told my mom, get me Fusion Fall now, please.
Or go to hell.
No, stop. But I remember, I can't even begin to like verbalize the visceral reaction my friends had who were like very much into anime when they saw the strange, for lack of a better term, Bishonen Dexter that existed. And I just remember going, what the fuck? Like, I don't know why, but it just didn't work for me. But I'm like, not as rules, but also, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
Why does he look like that? And the thing is, he was like the main character in that game for the most point. Like, he's like your main mentor or something like this. And I thought this was a weird pick. Because Dexter really wasn't at the forefront. But it was like, it was kind of nice to see like, oh man, Dexter, they're trying to give Dexter his second run, this time as a legitimate anime boy.
Yeah. Dexter, it is very interesting where it's like both, like people remember it because it's the first of like the cartoons, but it is kind of like in the shadow of a lot of stuff that came after, even stuff by Gennady. And with Dexter, it's just, I don't know, like it's such a good show like on its own that every single time I'm like about to watch it, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure this will be like pretty funny, but maybe not as good as Powerpuff Girls. You know, maybe it wouldn't have held up. And it's like, I'm always like, this is so good. This is such a good.
It's so funny.
Like,
it's such a funny
super
show.
funny.
I was watching through it. I was like, every fucking episode is just so good.
And it's definitely kind of like a lightning in a bottle moment too, because you had like Craig McCracken, you had Seth MacFarlane on this, and you know tons of other like great writers and board artists. Credits are weird for the show. Like it's kind of hard sometimes to, because like Gennady, gets a lot of credit, but like Paul Rudish, deserves his flowers too. Because I think a lot of people don't realize that Paul Rudish was designing so many of the characters in Gennady shows.
It was like the main art director for the show. Like
and his stuff is phenomenal. It's one of the many reasons why the show is so great, because it looks fantastic. It's part of that too is the way it's animated. Hanna-Barbera, we get back to that. I forgot that was an Ian thing, but like part of it too is Ian. Like these shows aren't animated well. Like it's the focus isn't so much animation, because there's very limited animation, but making all these keyframes look beautiful. It's like, who cares?
There are some like smooth cuts, like especially like the shorts that they did for What a Cartoon are like very smooth animation, but the show itself is very like they got it down, which does kind of remind me of like Steven Universe, where like the pilot had this certain style and then they like really simplified it for the show. But I remember like the crew and Rebecca Sugar and everything going like, we did that not because like not necessarily just because it would be easier to draw, but because those like the designs are just more coherent like in this simplified form than they were in the way that they were in the pilot. And it's like people that aren't in this industry or aren't into like art design or character design, those kind of things, they can't like wrap their head around that, so they just see like this looks weird and cooler, so it's like this must be better animation, and it's just like,
trust me.
And then of course
Transformers
about,
fans.
like,
I was that person at one point that thought like Transformers animated looks like ass, thinking like shows should look like the Dreamwave comics,
Yeah, exactly.
I quickly learned.
I think actually, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, then, like, I just think that's pushed too far in the Savino era.
Yeah,
it loses so much of its charm. It's very sterile. And I watched a couple episodes. Did I? Yeah, I think I did. Of the Savino one, just like, because I have not gone back and watched those very often. I did just to compare, and it's like it's like, I'm trying to think of a great analogy for it, but
I think it reminds me of like a modern soda label. where like they've like I know this is mean, but like if you see like how they do soda labels nowadays, like that's what that feels like to me. Like they just kind of took like, yeah, this label was always simple, but what if we made like, you know, some of the curves a little straighter,
modern,
like and the thing is, though, if you go ahead,
I was saying it's this weird for Dexter, at least it was this very retro style, like very inspired by the 50s and 60s era of like just animation and just design, and it just loses the charm. I think you had such great, you had some just amazing looking drawings in the original series. And I think that's partially due to like these guys grew up watching Hanna-Barbera, Looney Tunes, and anime, and I think you kind of lose that in those later seasons. And also just the way it's staged too. I noticed like the way it was boarded, the way it's animated, it's very flat. It's more like how a modern show would probably be staged and drawn at this point. And it just loses so many of those great dynamic shots and just some really clever framing in this show. Like I think one of the early episodes when the first episode, and when Dee Dee travels back in time to warn Dexter, and then when she's talking to like the current Dee Dee, and it cuts to like Dexter looking at the monitor
and react.
His big glasses, and each frame of those glasses is one of the Dee Dees. It's just clever stuff like that you're not really seeing anymore.
Like I think like I hate to use memes as like a measuring stick, but like there's a reason why so many like just single still shots of Dexter is still jokes online and like can be used in meme formats, because so many just full stills of Dexter get across so much comedy not even in motion, and like get across like bits and gags in a way that like is super funny. Like listen, I've seen Dexter leaning on like his locker talking to Einstein 1 billion times. Will it ever stop being the funniest goddamn thing? Probably not. Like the girls like having like this perfect like S line you can follow when their body's swooning over him. Like it's just I just love so many of the shapes. Every time Dee Dee just moves, I just love that you could just draw an S in her. Like it rules. I just love the way it looks and flows and shapes and just
Yeah, I like, because Dee Dee, like I said, she ended up being the character that I liked the most, like on this current watch through, because like she's not just like pure, I don't know, she's not just a buffoon, and she's not just a cartoon buffoon. She's not just like Agent of Chaos or whatever. I don't know. There's just like, and she's not completely sweet. She's just she seems very one-dimensional, but there's like a little bit more to her, like as far as like a comedy vehicle.
Yeah, like the episode
like,
where she's beefing with Amanda sister works too for that.
Yeah, exactly. In like Dexter, like similarly, like he is, you know, like at first you see him as like, oh, he's this tortured scientist. He's always like getting annoyed by, if only his stupid sister would leave him alone. And then like the more you learn, the more you realize like how much of a like self-important dick he is. Like literally leading into a movie called Ego Trip. And I want to talk about real quick, like, you know, all the different Dexters. And I remember like being a kid and thinking that the old man Dexter is like the funniest thing in the universe. But like
The Simpsons and Dexter's Lab was just like taking the piss out of old people so much.
Yeah.
Loved it.
And every time we did the Billy joke, I laughed. I'm like, I feel stupid, but also I don't care. It rules, Billy.
Anytime I have to go up a long flight of stairs, what is the fucking line that pops in my head? You know, of course it's put these stairs here.
And then
I love that Ego Trip went like full circle and just brought that bit back. And
yes, it's really good. And then, but I wanted to give a shout out to like young adult Dexter, who is like so funny because of how much he sucks.
That voice kills me.
And somehow his voice is more high pitched than
exactly like Christine Cavanaugh. I don't know what the hell she's doing.
I was going to say we have not given the late Christine Cavanaugh her flowers yet.
Yeah. Oh, so
how
good.
Amazing she is.
Fantastic. Like
just so funny. Like her voice is just so funny, and then like you listen to her in an interview, and she's like, "Oh, she sounds like a normal human." It's just, but like when you hear Dexter and you hear like Chucky, you're like, "Oh my god," they just sound otherworldly. Like she's able to embody this like
different kinds of little nerd like Also, I think this like it's a bummer, but also I understand why like she retired so early, like 2001. But also, way to go out as like a flex, like I could do it. I'm done. Yeah. Thank you. But
and then, Candy Milo is not bad as a voice actor, but it's just
Candy Milo is a very talented actress, but I just Kavanaugh just like had this, just had something that you just can't replicate. Is her certain line reads like. The stuff she would pull is like unworldly.
Yeah. And like I love in the movie where you have like, Dexter, young adult Dexter and old Dexter, and they're all voiced by her, and then like the hero, like badass muscle one is Jeff Bennett doing a Russian accent. Like that's I don't know. Like, that's just
and I think funny. It works because it's not a very good Russian accent, and I think that's what makes it work really well.
He's trying he's trying his damnedest to just like impersonate Kavanaugh, and I think that's it's really funny.
I think like just any scene of like old Dexter and like early 20s Dexter talking, I think I could put that in a bottle and just listen to it all day because it was just like, oh no, Dexter, and it's like it's just so fucking funny.
I clipped through some of that. It was funny enough. I was listening to a podcast about it fairly recently, but just. The audio of them saying hello to each other, like those time wasting gags, and then like when they all say goodbye, that shit has like the brainworms has stayed in my head for 20 something years. It's so
goodbye, Billy.
I feel bad for my partner who has to live with me because after I watch Ego Trips, I was just like. Goodbye, Dexter. Goodbye, Dexter. Just like in my like, I'm like, oh, I know I'm fucking annoying, but I can't stop because it's so funny. Like, also, let me just say, crazy Dune reference that I didn't remember being in Dexter with the Ego Trip movie with Mandark. I'm like,
you had real nerds working on that show at some point.
This is before this stuff was big. Like, we're doing Dune references in the 90s, bro.
And I'm curious to like watch like the last 2 seasons just to see, because like one of the episodes I remember is they kind of have like a bad guy who's very 70s anime inspired with is a very revealing outfit that I'm surprised made it on Cartoon Network. But it's just it doesn't feel as inspired. Like I think was it Manic Mailman's from Simpsons, disgruntled postman who's just Batman animated series Joker in a mailman outfit, but I think it's fucking brilliant.
It's super funny.
I want to talk about those like the weird like fruit pie commercials that were.
Oh, those are so funny. Yeah, they made me hungry also as a kid.
We're on the same wavelength here because I was thinking like I got to bring this up now. I think that's now my most quoted thing from Dexter. Anytime I mess up, and now it's like there is proof out there for the world to see. Like anytime I kind of mess up and go like you'd think like maybe the Homer Simpson dough would be the first thing.
Yeah.
But I find myself saying dough.
Yeah.
And I realize I'm like, that's the Justice Fruit Pies.
Yeah.
And I say it all the damn time.
Season 1 still has a really good its finale is really good with the Monstory where it's the battle between Dexter and Dee Dee like as giant monsters. Like that's also I wrote down a line that made me laugh a lot from that episode. Like the first line of it is he's like inspecting a tiny like a planet like in a speck of dirt or whatever, and he says my recent studies on Horton's theory of who that just made me laugh a lot. So like there's no way like I know I probably should have gotten that joke when I was a kid and I knew Horton Hears a Who like more, but like it's just funny as an adult being like, oh yeah, that's what it's joking about. And like what is it, another thing I wanted to mention in season 2 is that like episode I was like right before we recorded this I was like, oh fuck, I forgot to watch the Blue Falcon episode in season 2, and I watched, Blue Falcon and Dynamite, where Dexter like makes like Blade Wolf from Metal Gear Rising.
Dynamite X90 is so sick. It's the sickest.
That's the thing. I was like, this is actually really fucking cool.
I just called out one of my closest friends the other day because I realized neither of us can refer to someone as being blue without fucking going into the bit with the dad saying like, "Oh, don't be blue. There's always next year," thinking he's part of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah,
Christ, it's this
yeah,
show.
Just that
like,
scene where he's like in the living room, like watching TV, like as I like that. God, yeah, and that's another thing where like, how horribly ghoulish is it that Dexter is like, all right, he just needs to repair this robot. But he decided, like, this robot's too annoying, so I'm just going to leave his corpse.
Dude, this robot doesn't rule, dude.
Laboratory.
This robot doesn't kick ass. This thing needs to kick ass, dude.
And that's like a more positive ending, that episode,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Dexter's still like a dickhead in it, but...
That's like another example of like the show being really made by real nerds. And I think another example is, not to expose myself as a tabletop person, whenever a show has a D&D episode, I got to watch it, I got to love it. I love Dexter's friends playing D&D and like having the whole setup.
Yeah.
And yeah, Dexter's a little freak. Of course he's the GM. He's a little as a forever GM, of course a little control freak ass got to be the GM for his friends. And it's just such a fun gag, and I don't think we ever see those guys again. So
well, one of them was the brown-haired one and the Asian kid were from the Star Trek convention episode.
Yeah, there was a Star Trek.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's funny that like Dexter has friends sometimes, but like Dexter's supposed to be the unpopular nerd, but then like because they introduced later, what's his name, the kid played by Tom Kenny, was like Douglas
Mordecai, Douglas Mordecai. Douglas. Yeah, Douglas Mordecai. And he's like in the later seasons too. He sticks.
Yeah, I think they realized they're like, I guess Dexter needs some other nerd. But I feel like it's more fitting that Dexter is just this, awkward, unpopular nerd kid.
Like, I think him having friends that will like use him as a ride to conventions and play D&D with him, that's like the normal level of willing to deal with a nerd.
Yes, yeah.
Like we've all played D&D with someone who just kind of sucked, but you couldn't find another table. So I think that's like the perfect level for him.
Yeah, like Kusi being Dom DeLuise, which is like that. Just perfect. I remember as a kid, being, as somebody who watched a lot of Don Bluth movies as a kid, or at least somebody who watched like the 4 good Don Bluth movies. Ironically, I never saw like anything past All Dogs Go to Heaven until I was an adult. So my entire like teenage and adult life, I was like, yeah, Don Bluth, he's one of the greatest animation directors of all time. And then I went and watched like Rockadoodle and Troll in Central Park, and I was like, these are the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
he's fucking horrible.
Kind of overrated.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now I'm so pretentious that I'm like, I like the book better than the movie for Secret of Nim, but that's the level of like pedantic nerd that I've risen to as an adult. But yeah. So, is there anything else that I haven't talked about?
I mean, we kind of briefly talked about this, but I always thought, I'm like, wow, Dexter had 2 perfectly, brilliant endings, and they just still dragged it out because Last But Not Beast is such a great finale. Yeah, it's like the first full length, half hour, brilliant, really funny, cool, like the whole cast from Dial-M from Monkey and Justice Friends are incorporated into it. It's like it's one shared
Justice
universe.
Friends die. They all die.
I always love saying good job, Crunk. It's so great and it's so nerdy and it's so fun. It has such a great fuck you ending that's in the spirit of the show. But then they did Ego Trip, and Ego Trip is another phenomenal
it's great
closing of the book where it's like, just when you think things change, they just remain the same. It's like, this is eternal. Dexter and Dee Dee will always be, polar opposites. Yeah.
And that robot in ego trip, I remember like really fascinating me as a kid because it was like just the fact that it's so modular. Like as it goes on, it like not only does it change form, but like parts of it get destroyed, and then it like shifts the way that it moves and everything. It's like, man, they thought this through, all the way. You know, like they really hashed it out. And then like the final battle with like all the Dexters and all the Mandarks.
What an absolutely hilarious battle, by the way.
Yeah,
just like literally like old Dexter tripping over old brain Mandark, and that's sort of like that right there, pure comedy. It's just it's so
Baron
simple.
Harkonnen Mandark
like,
with
the like 20-something Mandark who is like, I know I talk about this all the time, but like him whipping Dexter and Dexter having this deeply over animated like tongue out scream moan, and I'm like, what's happening? What's going on?
Yeah, Gennedy's a freak. He's he's into that shit.
Oh, but I do think these guys are horny as fuck when you go back and watch the show. There are there like, I mean, there's something for everybody here, but like the women especially, you could tell the ones like, here's a funny cartoon character, and then there's like, oh, this is a babe.
There's many jokes of Dexter's parents having sex.
Yeah,
but like then you quit like, oh, they're not having sex. Yeah, just like, it's not gonna fit. It'll fit, honey. And like, oh, it's my sister. Like, but I remember like going through like the movie. One of the things that really stood up to me was I always remembered at the end of it the whole like "Go Dexter Go." I don't know why that's so funny to me. I don't know why old Dexter going "Go Dexter" and everyone joining in had me just in tears. And like then like, actually no, this is his big I'm gonna kill Thanos moment. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like,
and then it gets taken. Like it's so
like
good because they get to have their cake and eat it too, because it's like they have this big. Like actually like, oh yeah, you're getting like excited, and then it's completely undercut by Dee Dee coming in and just pressing the button, and it's like that's funny, but it was also like, it doesn't mean that the entire journey up to that point, wasn't cool or wasn't worth it. It's just like, I don't know, like it feels like perfectly in the spirit of
it's a comedy,
Dexter.
And it's and they love like which it's crazy because like, because Dexter is so Gendy, like that is like, it's almost like a self-insert, but it's not like it's not like this vain kind of self-insert that you normally associate with that word. It's, this character is just a punching bag, and it's, I don't know, like you don't see a lot of that anymore. At least not in kids animation, I don't think. I think. And even like Dexter, we were talking about the "Go Dexter Family Go" song. Like there is a family. This is like your typical setup for like any kind of TV show, but it's not a sitcom. I think. No. I'm not saying like, oh, kids shows aren't funny today. I don't watch many kids animation, so I can't say for sure. But from what I've like observed, something like Big City Greens, from what little I've seen, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a funny show, but the dynamic feels very, the whole idea of the show feels much like a television sitcom. It's like you take some members of the family, they're doing something, and maybe the B plot is, some other members of the family doing something. Yeah. Dexter isn't focused on that. Like, there's a family, but not the whole core of the story isn't a family.
No. Yeah. It's just Dexter and Dee Dee. Or sometimes just Dexter.
Yeah. But I think that's like almost like, you bring up Craig of the Creek too, and like the whole, I kind of feel like at the end of the day, this feels kind of like a sitcom. And it's Dexter's very unique.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think like, speaking of Craig of the Creek as like inspired by Dexter, I think Dexter plays with like ideas of like a kid being a nerd in a way that's like, oh, he plays D&D, he goes to convention stuff, right? I think weirdly enough, I've always thought like when I was a kid, like, oh, I would love to see more of this. I would love to see more of like him playing D&D, other stuff like that. Then I remember Craig of the Creek really did just sit down and go, realistically, these kids exist everywhere. And I think like the process of going, here's where the anime kids are, here's where these kids are, really does scratch an itch that I think Dexter created in me. That like I think why Craig the Creek stuff works like that. Where like Dexter, like I like it. I think it's neat that Dexter is like a weird robot kid, and he sometimes beefs with these guys or like goes to convention with these guys. It like really scratches the itch of like, because we get nerds and stuff all the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we don't ever get nerds where like realistically being into his nerd stuff is very formative when you're like no kid's like casually a Transformer nerd at 10. You know?
Yeah.
A lot of them are like, okay, can we take a step back? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say with I don't know, in regards to like shows that have like a similar style to Dexter or in that same like comedy DNA, like as far as modern stuff goes, like Jellystone is probably the closest, just because it's one of those shows where like by the end of the episode like no lesson is learned. Like very, very rarely is there any episode where the characters are like, I'm sorry that this happened, and like they have some type of emotional conclusion or whatever. It's usually just like nothing is learned, or like they learn a bad lesson at the end of the episode. It's just like, but it's like very funny, and I have no problem with shows that like teach lessons or whatever.
No,
it's
like,
great.
Even stuff like, even like OKKO like has its emotional moments. It's just that, like, the Dexter is so hyper focused on being what it is that like even the movie, which is like any show, even like Ed, Edd n Eddy had like
the movie has
an
a big
emotional
heartfelt
resolution.
Ending. And like,
And like Dexter is like, no, it's still stupid and mean.
I think the perfect example is like the movie ends with him and his future selves going, "What if we made a robot to kill our sister?" And I think that's a perfect example of them. Like not even older Dexter who's like 30 or the old one is like, "This is a bad idea." They're like, "No, we should build a robots together to kill our sister."
It always goes out on a gag too. Like
you gotta respect is.
I feel like a lot of premises for episodes just have an act 1 and an act 3. There's not an act 2. It's just it's like, here's what and it's a lot of weird premises too. Like I think the parrot trap is one of my absolute favorites, and I think that was just inspired by one of them probably going to some stupid toy store where you used to have those talking parrot toys that recorded what you said and repeated it. And to make a whole premise of an episode off of something like that,
and
it is great. That's something you can only do in a 7-minute cartoon. You can stretch that over 22 minutes.
Where it's just, he gets a dog, like that's and not even like he doesn't adopt a dog. Like a dog is like put upon him, and then he has to just like deal with it the entire time. And I was just like tears in my eyes laughing at the like him just like barking at the like junk on the floor, like the thing on the floor, and Dexter was like, what is it? What's going on? Can you tell me what it is? And then the dog just, because not to be like the hashtag relatable guy, but like anybody who's had a dog that is just like barking, and you're like, why are you barking? Like, what is the problem?
I do think my favorite Dexter's dad goof comes episode just that's like, who put this lab here? Who put this magnificent lab in here? Dexter, you gotta explain this lab. Brador Retriever is the whole group, and I'm like, this is peak comedy. It's the dumbest shit I've ever seen, but it's comedy.
It's such a dumb bad idea for an episode, but they just 100% commit to it, so it's hilarious.
Because
it's a bizarre concept. It's like it was cartoons still being cartoons back then.
Like I think if you make a cartoon and if at least 3 people who are working on this thinks it's funny, no matter how dumb it might be, I swear to God, some of that DNA is going to affect people who are watching it. Like just like because you're like, I know they were losing their minds at this silly joke.
Yeah, that's how we felt with Space Ghost, where it was like, it just felt like dudes making a show, and like some of it may not have hit, but like a lot of it did, because it was like, this is these guys in a room like just riffing and like what they think is funny, and like it's infectious. It just like gets you to laugh along with it. And like I don't know. That's Dexter, very important show, very special show to me, and like I always appreciate it, but I appreciate it every single time Like, I appreciate it more every time I revisit it. So.
I hate that I forget how good it is, but also it's kind of nice that I forget all the time, because when I go back to it, I'm like, God, this fucking rules. So it's a double-edged sword.
Anything else that we need to say before we wrap up?
I was just speaking of the dad being funny. I would give some props to the second half of the series. The Saturdays are made for dads meme has really taken off.
That's like the only thing I can think of from like that part of the series that like
the rest of that episode probably isn't funny. Neither is the retconning Mandark having hippie parents. Sorry, maybe that's why Dexter isn't as beloved, because it just had some really.
Yeah, I think the second
just went on too long. Yeah.
I guess my only last thought is justice for Mimi and Lily, for no other reason than I just think it's funny that there's more than one Dee Dee.
Yeah.
I just think that there's like Dee Dee has two friends that are very similar. I think it's just hilarious and good.
Yeah.
That girl's got problems. I love this show so much. It just it's a gift that keeps on giving. I just think it's really funny. It's just such a, like I said, it's a lightning in a bottle where you just have such a tremendous amount of talented folks conceptualizing it, drawing it, voicing in it. It's so funny. And I think I took credit for this a year ago, but I'll take credit for it again. I'm fairly confident I am the first person in the nation of Japan to quote the Justice Fruit Pies commercial out loud on the city streets of Tokyo. I'm pretty sure I've got to be the first person.
Was that like a thing for like the One Piece podcast?
No, I think I was just muttering, and I think I messed up, and I just said "do."
Okay. All right.
It's got to be me.
Oh, man.
I don't know. Maybe I should contact Guinness or something and pay them a ton of money to get that credit.
Yeah.
You meet Gendy, he shakes your hand. That's it.
Yeah, that's what I want Gendy to shake my hand for.
Steve, it was great to have you on.
Fantastic.
As always. Why don't you plug some stuff if you can?
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, doing this trip down memory lane. You could follow me on social media at Steve Yurko is my handle on pretty much any place, I would say. You could listen to me on the One Piece podcast. You could listen to me on 4Kids Flashback, which is another podcast I do, and that's going back and just talking about and uncovering a lot of the stories behind 4Kids Productions, the infamous,
that's cool.
licensing company that brought you Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and the bad One Piece stuff. And I think also, I co-host a Let's Play channel on YouTube. Pro CD Plays Games with Pro CD himself.
I was very happy to see you. I was like, oh, cool, Steve is on the... Because I, of course, follow Pro ZD, and I've been a big fan of someone's stuff ever since Vine, basically. But...
That's where I first saw him.
Everybody remember Vine for a second, and then just like be silent for a moment to remember Vine. But yeah, that's. And I was happy to see that.
Thank you. And I'm just going to find one more opportunity to sneak in another high pitched that I realized I was doing.
Yeah. But all right, Morgan, how about you? Where can we?
I'm Morgan. You can find me at Girl Next Vor on Tumblr and other social media sites I hate, but not Twitter. My Twitter is different, go there. And it's a secret because I talk too much shit on it. I'm in other stuff, but honestly, I'm not talking about them right now. Not because they're important, because I forget.
Okay. Yeah. There you go.
That's pretty much it. You can just find me at Girl Next Door. I draw, I complain about stuff, and I talk about vampires and tabletop RPGs too much. That's it.
I still refuse to go to Blue Sky, so you can basically only find me on Twitter. Twitter.com/WaspRanger, WAZP Ranger. Mostly stream of consciousness stuff, but I do post about videos I'm making or podcasts that I'm involved with. If you want to support the podcast, then go on over to It's Only Magic at Patreon at the $1 level. If you only got one singular dollar, you can still get cool stuff. You get our off-topic show, Shit Shooters, and then you also get all of our episodes. There's like 70 episodes of Wow Cool Ropod, which is me and my friend Dwayne, aka Bolt Creature, on Twitter, going through and reviewing every single robot in existence. And it's like 5-minute episodes. It's a lot of fun. And we just do like 10 at once. And we recently did like the Char's Red Zaku and like a couple other things like that. It's just like the epitome of cool robot. We also did Night Scream from Beast Machines recently, which was not a cool robot. Spoiler.
Very scary looking robot.
Yeah, spoiler for that.
Call me when you do O Blocker, then maybe I'll listen.
Yeah, we'll bring you on. And at the $5 level, you can get this a week early. You can get a podcast to do with Cody, Stephen's Kings, where we go through every single Stephen King adaptation in existence, which is not. Some of them are good, some of them are quite bad. So that's a fun experience. Also, get all of our Robots in Disgust series, which is us talking about all the Babe Transformers movies and all other stuff, all this other great stuff at that $5 level. Check that out if you want to support me. Also, my videos, whenever I make them, you can get them like a week early. But thank you so much for listening. And this is weird because this is going to be, I think this will be the 4th episode, even though it's the 3rd one we recorded. But we haven't done Two Stupid Dogs yet, but we are going to. I think that'll be the one before this. So that means the next episode is going to be the pilots. We're going to be talking about like a handful of pilots. Like the first couple that were made for Cartoon Network that failed. Like we're only doing failed pilots because that's something I want to do like at the end of every month of talking about, doing this show. Like I want to spare one episode for talking about the pilots. Probably get really old really quick. But we'll see.
We're going through it. We got to go through it. We have to suffer. It's our culture.
We got to get to like, I don't know. We got to get to like Korgoth the Barbarian stuff. That counts, right? Yeah. I don't know. It was made by Cartoon Network Studios, so it counts.
For billions of dollars. Yeah.
But all right.
And like a lot of people that worked on that pilot worked on Dexter. So
yeah, and like there's a lot of DNA there. All right. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Enter at your own peril, past the bolted door where impossible things may happen that the world's never seen before.
In Dexter's laboratory lives the smartest boy you've ever seen. But Dee Dee blows his experiments to smithereens.